Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we want to thank you all for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about Namaste as the spiritual practice of keeping consciousness in constant relation with the divine. Listen as we discuss A Man is What He Thinks About All Day Long by Ralph Waldo Emerson. In this show, we will explain some of the benefits of acknowledging divinity, where I stand, and how we think is what we become. What surrounds us is within us, and the reverse is true. What is within us surrounds us. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and accept the allness of spirit. So, Swami, today's title of the show is Namaste is honoring divinity within. Let's talk about Namaste and what it means to you.
Yeah, I think the first time I heard Namaste was probably close to 41 years ago at the Temple of Kriya Yoga in Chicago. And at that time, I understood it to mean I bow to the divinity within you. As time moved on, my understanding of it shifted to the divinity within me acknowledges the divinity within you, which is still kind of on a personal level where I am seeing a me and a you. And today, I understand it to mean the I of being recognizes itself. Only one mind means only one divine life. And so I think the term has evolved for me as far as my level of understanding of what it is. More and more now I'm starting to see it not so much as something I believe in as much as a demonstrable principle.
So if we accept the definition, the divinity in me recognizes the divinity in you, you're saying that that is still a mortal sense. But isn't that a good starting point?
Well, we got to start somewhere. Like we've been saying, we're trying to come out of the modes of mortal thought, human thinking on a rational level, which is primarily a belief in two powers, where we're working with duality. As we start to accept ourselves on a more unified state, we start to acknowledge this higher sense of life, which is the absolute spiritual reality. Things change because you're moving out of the belief in the many into the understanding of the one.
So in order for us to recognize the divinity in another person, we can't think of them as another person. We have to think of them as not being separate from us.
Right. In order for us to really successfully do that, we must know ourselves in the same way. You must know yourself spiritually. We really have to know ourselves in the way that we're created by the divine creative principle. By us acknowledging the spirit within ourselves, then it becomes more accessible to recognizing it in everything that is appearing in our corporeal senses.
And is that what you mean by honoring the divinity within?
Yeah, honoring it, acknowledging it, having awareness of it.
Well, you did say only one mind means only one life. So what I said earlier, we can't see somebody as separate from ourselves. We have to see them as being the same one life that we are.
Right. And what we're learning is we can't do that with the mind that we have accepted to get us through this lifetime. The mortal mind, corporeal sense, can't bring forth the divine image. And so the Bible recommends repent, which translates into think differently. We have to graduate from thinking on a material level to understanding and eventually knowing the spiritual truth of being.
Well, I'd like to talk more about thinking. And there's a quote in the summary from Ralph Waldo Emerson that says, "A man is what he thinks about all day long." I realize that we don't want to just look at somebody and think namaste. We have to get past the thinking process. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's 100% correct. We have to move beyond thinking to what we would call realizing or knowing the truth, knowing what is appearing in my five senses is really only my thought about what's here, because I really have to pierce through the material beliefs that I have accepted and recognize the divine creation, which is right here, right now, but it doesn't report in the five sense mind. So the term that we've been using is the Christ, or spiritual light, or the spirit within. However you want to look at it, that will make the divine creation intelligible to you. But it won't be on a material sense level, it will be on a spiritual sense level. That's a big part of the practice of yoga, is experienced after the fifth stage, pratyahara, sense withdrawal. Because the truth is really found before thought and above corporeal sense.
So if a man thinks all day about himself as being something separate, like there is a me and a you, then that's going to limit his ability to move forward spiritually.
Yeah, thought creates an interference pattern with the divine mind. The Bible would call it the Word of God. The invisible, intangible, divine creative principle that is right here, right now, pouring out its eternal life is not recognizable to the human corporeal senses. And so the term that they used was faith. We had to develop faith, a belief in something that was invisible and intangible. But it wasn't belief without proof. It was a certain degree of trust without reservation until you proved the presence of this divine creative principle. The divine creation is perfect. And if we can acknowledge it and hold it so that it corrects our thought, it should outpicture as what was called a healing or a miracle.
Now, you've been saying for years how we think is what we become. So let's talk about this process of thinking and help us to understand how we have to think righteously.
Yeah, the way that we've broken it down now is still using the same diagram that we use for our logo, which includes the 7 chakras and the 12 signs of the zodiac. By holding true to the divine sequence, we work with the zodiacal signs. And so we're coming out of what was called the modes of mortal thought, human modes of thinking, which are working on contrast. They work in duality. They really recognize what we call now the false sense of existence. But we have to come out of Gemini, which is the lower mind, and then we have to come out of Virgo, which is the mid-mind, and we have to come out of Sagittarius, which is the higher mind, because they work on contrast. They believe in two powers. And then we finally graduate to divine mind, which is found in Pisces. And to let this divine mind, which doesn't work in contrast, it works in the absolute. It only sees the divine creation, which is perfect. And by us accepting that to be the mind of our new mode of thinking, we can start to see things differently and as a result, have a profound effect on what is appearing in our corporeal senses?
So it sounds like how we think is what we become. Sounds the same, but means something very different when we understand these modes of thinking that you're talking about and understand that the physical world is a mental image.
Right. Because prior to our discovery of Christian Science, we were still working on a mental level. We would use our human corporeal senses, our ability to form thoughts and opinions based on the testimony of our senses. We would work with what we called positive thinking and belief. And what we learned is that with positive thinking and belief, you can have an effect on what is appearing in your corporeal senses. You can change finite bad to finite good. But what we also discovered, when spirit is cause, creation is perfect. And that's a limitation. If you use your human modes of thinking, you can't graduate to the perfection of being that is only available at the level of divine mind. And the only way that we can acquire that is to accept we are spirit. In your accepting that you are spirit, you come out of the belief in the many, and that awareness of the realization of the one will dissolve false sense of separateness that we came out of. And then once you've had that revelation, then the thought of going back becomes non-existent.
I'd like to talk more about what is called this world and how it relates to what I've heard is called like the thought stream. Maybe you can delve into that for us.
Yeah, this entire physical experience is a mental image. And like you said, what is called this world is a thought stream inside of a larger sense of existence called thy kingdom. This world is a separate stream under different rules than the larger sense of absolute life. This world runs on a belief in two powers and intoxicates awareness to think the unreal is real. Now, Namaste is a practice of disregarding the testimony of the material senses and acknowledging the divine image standing where the false sense image appears. And so how we think is what we become. But like we said before, if we are accustomed to forming thoughts and opinions based on the information that's coming through our corporeal senses, we are living at a human level of awareness. And human thought will externalize as the limitations of the human image, the imperfections of mortal thought. But if we can graduate to thinking with divine mind and letting divine mind govern us from within, then of course we have the opportunity to outpicture the perfection of being.
Swami, you had said earlier, this belief in two powers and intoxicates awareness to think the unreal is real. Well, how does that happen? How do we become intoxicated to that kind of a belief?
Well, I think the answer to that is that we're hypnotized and we're reacting to the unreal. So we're trying to figure out how the unreal became real. That's what we call being in this thought loop, that you're trying to figure out something that can't be figured out. Whether we realize it or not, human thought really contaminates consciousness, the pure consciousness of the divine mind. And so this interference pattern that we create with forming thoughts and opinions interferes with pure consciousness that holds the template for perfect creation. Because we're hypnotized, we're reacting to everything on this thought level. In yoga, they call it a cycle of death and rebirth. And what a lot of us don't understand is that it's our belief in that gives it any semblance or resemblance of power, because it's not power. The only self-existent power in this universe is spirit. And spirit is absolute life, absolute love, eternal harmony. And what we're experiencing at this thought level is the conflict, the contrast between these conflicting powers. And we call that energy. But in truth, real life, the larger sense of life beyond corporeal sense, is the only real life.
Well, I think we'll pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. So listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments.
Snow. That's really cool. Or, it's like you wake up one morning, it's like, you know what? I'm tired.
Kriya Yoga Theory 2 is a unique and revolutionary practice and forum designed to facilitate the growth process in human development. Apotheosis is a real experience and has an evidence procedure. You cannot lead someone to permanent change by doing for them what they must do themselves. Personal accountability and responsibility are the foundation of Kriya Yoga Theory 2. You must be engaged and devoted. Prana power brings virtue to overcome fear, wisdom to overcome ignorance, purpose to overcome selfishness, enthusiasm to overcome laziness. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. These sessions are a celestial positioning system to guide the individual into union with the divine. For more information or to sign up for your next session online, go to www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So Swami, in the opening, we said we're going to talk about Namaste as the spiritual practice of keeping consciousness in constant relation with the divine. Well, what are some of the benefits of doing that?
Yeah, I think what we're learning is a lot of what the Bible kind of tells us about Jesus, because how Jesus healed the sick. One of the better things I've ever read is what Mary Baker Eddy says in her book, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, on page 476. Jesus beheld in science the perfect man, who appeared to him where sinning mortal man appears to mortals. Science backs what we're talking about here. Quantum physics now tells us the physical world is observation dependent. And it is the observer that sets the measurement for what's called the collapse of the wave function. Reality as we know it is a state of possibilities until someone thinks, which is what they call sets the measurement, and then it appears. Now, Jesus was able to think with divine mind. And so his ability to think with this divine mind allowed his thought to have this profound effect on how somebody else even sees themselves. And the quote that you find in the Bible that I really like is in John 12:32. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. Another thing that we talk about in Kriya Yoga is this thing called darshan, which is being seen by an enlightened individual, which lifts you into a higher sense of awareness. So by us learning how to see things spiritually, to see things from this divine creative level of understanding, has a profound effect on what is appearing at a human sense level.
So Jesus definitely demonstrated true Namaste, and the demonstration benefit was the healings and the miracles that he performed.
Right. And that's what we're starting to cultivate is the practice, that if you can start to pierce through the testimony of your senses, if you can have that sense of faith or even initially belief that there is a divine creation, behind this world is thy kingdom. And that kind of gives you a platform that you can start to live from. We've really established our Kriya Yoga practices in the divine idea, that if you don't start with the divine idea, it's very difficult for you to add that on afterwards.
I know we had a conversation the other day, and I asked you about what I try to practice when I'm at work, working in a retail environment. Every time when a guest comes in through the door, I try not to see them as separate from me. The first thing I try to think of is Namaste. I try to think of them as a part of me. And so we had a conversation about that. And then I remember saying to you that I was concerned that I might be thinking about that in a mortal sense. And then maybe you could give us some light on what we did talk about.
Yeah, like you say, when you're working at that level of thought, when you're thinking about a person, you're working with the testimony of your senses. As you cultivate your practice, like we're saying, constant relation with the divine, that the divine idea, eventually after a while, where you stand will be divinity. Where a person appears before you will be divinity. As your awareness expands into this larger sense of life, it will become your default response to everything. But initially, we're still working from a corporeal sense level, and we respond to the testimony of our senses. What you're saying is if we start to fill our thought with these divine ideas, that it will start to make our thought buoyant. And then we'll rise above that knee-jerk response to the testimony of the senses until eventually our belief that there is an invisible, intangible, divine creation right here will become more tangible to you. More and more as you practice. Like we had said in another show, meditation is the 7th stage of yoga. And the 5th stage of yoga is pratyahara, sense withdrawal. The meditative state really is when you are before thought and above corporeal sense. Your mind is opened and you're seeing things not so much as a human thinking about what is out there, but it's a much more subjective experience because your identity has graduated from physical to mental and eventually to spiritual. From spiritual identity, you're living out from the one. At that level of understanding where everything is one, it is the one divine life looking at itself, as itself, of itself, to itself. And everything is subjective. But one of the things that we've talked about was, how do I know that I'm doing this? And one of the main things that we have to fall back onto is our corporeal senses. What am I experiencing? What are the results? And like you said earlier, if everything is proving out to be harmonious, things are becoming win-win for everybody involved, these are the divine qualities. Then you know that what you are calling truth is the one true truth. As long as you get more proficient at operating from this level of consciousness and working that relationship between what's appearing in your corporeal senses and how you're thinking, until that becomes your default mode of experiencing life.
And then I do want to spend some time talking about another line in our opening, and that is, what surrounds us is within us. And the reverse is true. What is within us surrounds us. Now, does this also have to do with thought?
Yeah, because whatever it is that we're experiencing is what we hold in our consciousness. Now, whether it's in your field of awareness or outside your field of awareness, you want to get accustomed to really looking at what is around you to get a better understanding of how you're thinking. Even when we do the asana class, we work with the physical body. The shape, the composition, the condition of the body, how the segments of the body line up, the range of motion we have at articulations. Is there pain, discomfort, instability, lack, or limitation? These are all of the comprehensive clues that we can work with to let us know either I have a belief in the perfection of being, or I have a belief in something other than the perfection of being. And rather than trying to fix the appearance, the physical body, which is just a mental image anyway, we go to meet this at the level of thought. Because I can change how I think. I can change what I believe. And then what we want to do is graduate from thinking and trying and striving and personal will, personal sense, to this spiritual sense of selfhood, impersonal. And then from that acknowledgement or that avenue of awareness of divine mind, we stop trying, striving, struggling. We're not trying to fix anything. All we're trying to do is let go of the belief that I'm not the divine creation, and then let that divine omnipresence correct your thought, and then watch it improve what is appearing in your senses.
So let's just summarize how we're going to put Namaste into practical application. Now, you've been saying for years 3 big words, and that's put God first. Would that be someplace for us to start? Putting God first before we do anything, whether it's mopping the floors or getting in the car, whatever, greeting somebody at your work. Do you think that's a good place for us to start? And is that going to make some changes for us?
Well, I think, filling your thought with this divine idea is very helpful. And then eventually we stop thinking and we start knowing. The other thing is we want to come out of the thought loop and we want to know the truth. We want to know that we are an eternal spiritual being. From that acknowledgement of this present perfection, it starts to reveal itself to us. Our fidelity to it, acknowledging its presence, will activate it in our experience.
So just to clarify, if I'm going to put God first before I do anything and give thanksgiving, I know I'm doing this by mortal means, but eventually that's going to turn into more of a state of being than something that I'm doing.
Right, and what you want to start to do is stop thinking about God, making your mind an avenue of awareness for the presence of divine mind where you start to think out from God. God is your life. You are the reflection of this divine principle, this divine law. From that level of understanding, surrender your will and then let it guide you and reveal its perfect divine creative plan.
Well, with that, we do have to start closing down the show for today. So listeners, be sure to visit the website, www.ipdtransform.com. On the homepage, when you see the fading banner and it says Blog Talk Radio Show, click that. That directs you to the Blog Talk Radio Show catalog page. And then don't forget clicking the products tab, and then online classes directs you to all the classes that Swami has available for you. So Swami, any final thoughts about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and accept the allness of spirit. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. I'm Lisa Winton with me, Kenny Toy, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.